CatalyzU vets, trains, and places Africa's leading non-technical talent at global startups. Let me introduce my co-founder, Carl. He was born to Zambian and Swedish entrepreneurs and reflects a new age Africa connected across continental lines. Prior to CatalyzU, he served as the head of impact at Goodwill Investments, a $350 million Dutch impact fund. He has also been invited to speak on impact investing at Oxford and the Global Impact Investing Network.
Thanks, Luke. Now, let me introduce the other half of CatalyzU. Just like me, he was raised by entrepreneurs, but born and brought up in South Africa. He moved to the US for college and attended UCLA, where he graduated as one of the top 10 distinguished undergraduates in his class. Prior to CatalyzU, he served as the head of investments at Future Africa, a leading Pan-African fund. He's also been invited to speak on African startups and venture capital at Harvard and Wharton Business School, just to name a few. But that's enough about us. Let's chat about the opportunity. According to a recent McKinsey report, Africa will add 796 million people to the global workforce by 2050. This will make Africa home to the world's largest and youngest population. As you can see, the aggregate of all other continents and countries listed here will actually reduce the global workforce by 59 million people. Meet Araba. She attended the University of Cape Town, Africa's #1 university. She studied economics. She currently earns $13,000 a year as a startup's junior business development analyst in Cape Town. Juxtaposing this, James, an identical junior business development analyst from New York, earns $84,000 a year, 6.5 times that of Araba.
So how are we unlocking this? Cue CatalyzU. On the left, we have our supply side, young African talent. We vet this talent as they enter our ecosystem through aptitude quizzes and psychometric testing. We then train this talent to acquire non-technical, startup-specific skills in roles such as business development and marketing. We have a free startup operator school to onboard this talent in a freemium manner, while our paid courses range from $100 asynchronous offerings through to $12,000 micro MBAs. Lastly, we place that talent at our global network of startups by leveraging our machine learning-driven matchmaking. So you may be thinking, why would talent choose CatalyzU to train them? In late 2021, we created Africa's most sought-after startup and venture capital network. Within just 1 year, this network grew to include the leading 70 venture capital funds in Africa, with access to their over 1,000 portfolio companies therein. We utilize this network to source our lecturers. Circling back to Araba, after her CatalyzU course, she decides she's ready to embark on the placement process. She enters the CatalyzU platform and views the jobs that match her data-driven profile. She applies. Instantly, Tim, a Techstars founder out of Chicago, receives Araba's profile and decides to begin the interview process with her. If Araba is successfully hired, CatalyzU will receive 15% of Araba's first-year salary. Over to Carl to chat the numbers.
With a total addressable market of $30 billion, we're looking to grow a venture scalable business that generates outsized returns. We're on track for over $300,000 of revenue in our first 12 months. And as you can see, much more once we scale. With additional talented cohorts, like our first one, already underway, we're disrupting the status quo as we strive to become the #1 source of work-ready startup talent. Join us, and let's take African talent to the world,
And the world to African talent. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar. My name is Anthea Hartzenberg, and I'm the head of operations here at CatalyzU, and I'm so glad that you've decided to spend the next hour with us. While we wait for a few more people to join, we working in the VC space know that when it comes to your network, it is your net worth. So I'd love to hear from some of you who've joined us tonight. Here's what you can do. If you're on Zoom, on your computer or on your cell phone, simply head to the chat button at the bottom. It should be a little a speech bubble and tell us your name, what you do, and where you're joining from. And then also please drop your LinkedIn profile into the chat so that we can connect with each other over there. I will also start. That one is mine. You're all welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm also very excited to see some of our current fellows on the call. I also encourage all of you to drop in your LinkedIn so that other participants can connect with all of you over there. We are very short on time in terms of we only have an hour for tonight's conversation, and I think it's going to be jam-packed with a ton of useful insights. So while you introduce yourself in the chat, let's get the housekeeping out of the way. This is a Zoom call. This is a recorded Zoom session. We will be sharing the recording plus the highlights with everyone who signed up for tonight's event and also with our broader community. When it comes to video, feel free to keep yours on or off, completely your preference. But what I do ask is that you please keep yourself on mute unless you are asking a question. If you drop off the call at any point, simply join again using the link in the calendar blocker. It will bring you right back to the session. And then finally, if you have any technical issues, you can send a direct message to my colleague Benji. You will be able to find him in the participants list, and he'll be happy to help and sort you out. For those of you who don't know anything about CatalyzU, welcome. I'm really excited to have you here this evening. CatalyzU vets, trains, and places Africa's leading non-technical talent into the startup and venture ecosystem. In just over, I guess, a year of operations, probably a year and a half, we've trained over 140 fellows from across Africa. We've counted 18 African countries to date and some beyond as well. Our fifth cohort of our flagship CatalyzU Venture Capital Fellowship is currently happening. And as I mentioned, I'm really excited to see some of our fellows here this evening. Please connect with them on LinkedIn. I've seen a bunch of LinkedIn profiles dropped into the chat, so feel free to reach out and connect there. Finally, before finally, our next VC fellowship will run in October of this year. If you would like to sign up, simply complete the expression of interest form. Benji will drop it into the chat, and we'll let you know once that is open for applications. Very excitedly, we've recently launched our placement platform where hiring managers at startups and VCs can interview ready-to-hire candidates for jobs from our network. So all young African catalysts who've been trained, have completed our fellowships and are now ready to either grow in their VC careers or step into a VC career. I have a short ad break around that. Let me quickly play that and then we'll jump into the conversation. Fantastic. If you are interested in hiring from the Young African Catalyst Network, you can pop an email to talent@catalyzu.io and we will be able to sort you out. To tonight's conversation, very, very excited to kick off a very important conversation this evening. Tonight, we'll be talking about breaking into the VC industry. Whether you're currently working at a startup or working in corporate and you're looking to transition, or if you're in the VC industry and thinking about the skills necessary to grow in your role, tonight will be for you. Many of you here might have recently read the insightful piece by Stephen Deng titled Africa's S-Curve. He's at DFS Lab. The piece is very interesting, and I definitely recommend that you give it a read. But the parts about Africa's demographic destiny are really apt for our conversation this evening. As we all know, it's an incredibly tough job market right now. Stephen warns that if left to our current trajectories, Africa's population surge looks like it's set for a path or on path for creating one of the biggest unemployment crises the world has ever seen. So I think that's very alarming. And then you add a lens onto that, which is the VC and startup space. And we've seen many layoffs in the startup space in particular, but in the VC space, as we look to emerge from this funding winter, many people are saying later this year, early into 2025, what does that mean for candidates? What does it mean for talent? What does the landscape look like? We're going to unpack all of that this evening. So how can candidates better position themselves for the few roles that's available in the space right now? Or how can they line themselves up better for the roles that might become available into the future? We're going to unpack some of those this evening. Joining me for tonight's conversation, while I stop sharing my screen, I'm going to invite all of our speakers onto the stage. I'm very excited to be joined by Ololade Odunsi, who's the Portfolio Talent Lead at Founders Factory Africa. Noi Omaboe is a Sales and Partnerships Lead at Rafiki, a jobs marketplace for fractional talent across the continent. And finally, Arinze Obiezue, an investment analyst at Future Africa. Welcome, everyone. Let's start with some brief introductions. I'm going to kick off with you, Ololade. Briefly tell us who you are, what you do, and why you've joined this evening.
All right. Hi, everyone. So my name is Ololade Odunsi. I'm based in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm the Portfolio Talent Lead at Founders Factory Africa. Essentially, I work with the various founders within the FFA portfolio to support them to build and optimize their teams. I'm here because, I'm here to provide some insight into how to get your foot in the door in the VC space. And if you're there, give you some insights to how to grow your career and move forward.
Love that. Thanks so much. Noi, over to you.
Hi, guys. My name is Noi. So I'm from Ghana, but I grew up currently in the UK. So I told Anthea and Benji, I feel like a bit of a fraud because I'm not currently in VC. I'm on the other side of the table at a startup called Rafiki, which is a freelancer platform connecting African talent in product design, web development, branding and marketing to global businesses in the UK and the US. But I guess prior to that, I spent just under a year or 10 months or so working with Africa Invest, which is a Series A fund in Tunisia, but focused on Africa. And then before that, I was completing my MBA at Oxford University. And there I was also involved in something called the Oxford Seed Fund, which is a student-led fund focused on startups related to the university. I guess my experiences, I'm working backwards. My experiences before the MBA were in sales and account management at a growth stage tech startup in the US, as well as my family business in Ghana doing small-scale VC and joint venture partnerships. But yeah, happy to shed some light on either of these experiences. I guess maybe one final thing to mention is I'm an alum, but I was also part of the CatalyzU fellowship when it was called YAC. So happy to answer any questions there too.
Fantastic. Great to have you, Noi. Finally, Arinze.
Oh, hi everyone. I'm excited to be here. I'm Arinze, originally from Nigeria, currently in Lagos. I'm currently an investment analyst at Future Africa, which is an early stage sector agnostic fund here on the continent. Prior to VC, I was running a magazine that was focused on African youth culture while completing my master's in global affairs, specializing in AI policy. But I started off my career at Meta as a content designer in London, working on products around curbing the spread of misinformation and sensitive content on Facebook and Instagram. Happy to share more about my experience, like my long-winded experience, and like my longer running path I'm getting to VC. But happy to be here today.
Awesome. Well, I'm really glad to have you all, and let's jump right in. So, Arinze, I'm actually going to start with you. So, if you ask 10 people currently working in the VC space, you'll probably get 10 different answers about how they landed their first job or how they got into the industry. And that just underscores that there's no one size fits all. I think many people talk about VC being so nascent on the continent. We also have not figured out what's the best way to get candidates into various roles. What we do know is networks very important, and then referrals of quality candidate. But I'm keen to hear your view. What should aspiring VCs, people wanting to break into the industry, think about if they want to, land a job in the space?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think, in summary, I think the main thing is just figuring out what your X factor is. Like, what is your unique value add? Because the thing is, we are way past the point where we're content with investors that are just putting money behind them startups and running away. Most funds themselves are looking for ways to add value to startups beyond the capital that they invest. So when VCs are looking for people to bring on board, they're the main question that they're asking themselves is, what value can this person add to the startups in my portfolio, like in startups that I'm investing in? And just having financial skills is not enough, because there's so many people that have that, right? And like, I guess that's why the relational aspect of VC is important, right? So one of the harder things I think to build is a network that is relevant to funds. So what is what community of people are VCs trying to connect with, and where can you add value there? Is it with a community? Like, do you have access to a network of like high quality founders? Do you have access to partners that startups could be interested in working with? Are you an ex-founder that can bring in some perspective from your own experience building businesses to now help founders solve the difficult problems that come up every single day in the process of venture building? Because even thinking back to my journey getting into VC, I've been trying to break into VC since 2020 when I graduated from undergrad, and it only happened in 2023. And for me, I think my X factor was a combination of my network, yes, but also my prior experience founding companies. One of the companies that that I co-founded, which was a coaching marketplace, was acquired in 2023 while I was running my magazine. And it's still very relatively baby founder experience, but there's still a lot of transferable insights from that experience that will be relevant to other founders that I'll be working with. So combining that with my experience in tech, my finance skills, my network, and then this operator found the experience was, I think, what became my X factor. So I think for people that are looking to break into VC, I think just figure out what your X factor is and really go in on that.
I love that, and I'm so glad that you actually explained a little bit what your X factor is, because I was going to ask you about that. But to wrap up there, it's know what your X factor is, what value can you add, so do a bit of thinking around that. What is your network? Who do you have access to? And what's your experience? So what are the things that you've done, where you've worked, that really helps make up that profile of a candidate? I think that's pretty powerful. Want to move on to Noi. No, in your case, you recently were at Africa Invest, and now, you're kickstarting the role of sales and partnerships at a startup called Rafiki. What are some of the lessons that you've learned working in the VC space that is useful now in your new role?
Yeah, for sure. So I think if I think back to the internship, the bulk of my work was split in three different buckets. So about 50% or 60% doing deals, so working on investment memos, maybe 30% on wider research, and 10% on admin tasks. If that was to become then a full-time hire, what the actual investment officers were doing, it'd be the same thing, just including maybe some more sourcing and portfolio management. So from that experience, I think it's really just taught me to have a structure in place. Something as simple as having, agendas for meetings and being good with time management has been really helpful in, the startup world where everything is extremely chaotic. And then just being so research oriented has really ingrained sort of this culture of, keeping up to date on what's happening on the continent, which with Rafiki is helpful for knowing what's happening with the world of fractional hiring, and the freelancer space. So that was the take from the internship. I think from the Oxford Seed Fund, it was much earlier stage, so a lot more sourcing and going out to founders, telling them to apply. And this translates perfectly to acquiring new clients and partners. So just knowing how to sort of offer value before requesting something has been very key with many of the conversations I've had. And then I'd say the final thing is we actually just completed our accelerator with the Baobab Network, so formally launching a pre-seed round. And just being on the other side of the table has been really helpful in knowing what a fund is going to ask for, prior to and during the due diligence phase. Obviously, we're much earlier than Africa Invest, which is at Series A, but it's still always helpful to have all the right documents prepared and be thinking of that ahead of time. So those are the few learnings that I've extracted that have been very helpful in this new role.
Yeah, I think one of the key takeaways for me from that is that if you're on the startup side right now looking to move into VC, or the other way around, or even if you're at a corporate, there are definitely setups, skills, ways of thinking, frameworks that you can apply in the different roles, and you shouldn't disregard some of that. And even if you're sitting and thinking, what are those things, as you prep to go out and look for roles or network to build roles, be clear on what those transferable skills are when you go into that conversation. Love that. Ololade, I want to come to you. Arinze touched on this a little bit, which is, the expectation almost that you have a very strong finance background as a way to set you apart. But to his point, many candidates have that. So I think that when it comes to that debate around, aspiring VC professionals having or needing a strong background in finance, we also know that the reality is that there are various functions in a VC beyond finance, which, platform, community, investor relations, etc. So as portfolio talent lead, can you tell us a bit about how important do you rate a finance background in general? And then can you maybe also help us understand how non-finance candidates can position themselves to move into these non-finance roles in VCs?
Thanks, Anthea. So in my experience, a finance background is only critical for finance-related functions. So take, for instance, if you are working within the finance team as an accountant or a finance manager of a VC, where you're actually disbursing funds, payables, receivables, those accounting functions, right? That's when it's critical. For investment analysts, investment managers in that space, it's a bit more flexible. So a finance background is great, but we can posit more commercial focused courses. So if you have a background in, say, commerce or economics, management, finance, those sort of non-core finance disciplines, that is also fine as well, because you're looking at it from a broader economic perspective as opposed to just finance and accounting perspective. So if you're looking to break into the VC space and you have a commerce or economics background, it's fine. Please I'll encourage you to apply for it. And then later on, you can then level up by taking finance courses or getting your CFA or any other accounting certification if you do need to. And then we have the third group of people who are, with the platform services, which is something that is coming up in the VC space, where we have technical experts in other fields aside from investments, banking, and investment analysis. These ones provide support to the businesses, to the startups in the portfolio. For example, someone like me, for instance, I don't have a finance background. So you're offering services that are non-finance related. We just need you to be an expert in the field that you're working in, so that I can provide the right kind of support to the businesses.
Which also creates diversity of thought, diversity of experience, which is beneficial to, the employer ultimately. Ololade, I want to ask a follow-up question there, which is not one that we prepared for, but based on your experience, where are the gaps right now in terms of the talent pool? Is it more on the finance side? Is it more on the other operation side of VCs? So what are we currently stuck on in terms of talent for VCs in particular?
Talent for VCs is more on the other side, right? Because the platform support is still a nascent space that a lot of VCs are just thinking around adopting. Right now, I can only name about 3 or 4 business VCs who I know have implemented it. Founders Factory is one. We have Future Africa as well. So this is still a nascent space that VCs are still thinking of adopting. So they're looking for people who are experts in the field. And it goes beyond just knowing about your industry in the country that you're in. We need people who have a broad range of experiences across multiple industries so that you can support the broad range of portfolio businesses that your VC invested in.
Arinze, you want to add to that?
Yes, I think just a tiny thing. Because Ololade can correct me on this point, but I think from what I've seen, I think the rarer skill is actually a soft skill. It feels like the rarer skill is like founder empathy. And that's like the ability to understand how founders think, what they're feeling, like how they're processing the different things and struggles and tribulations that they are going through, and just being able to understand how best to support them. Because ultimately, you're becoming a VC not to analyze startups, but to support them. Right. And having founder empathy allows you to know how best to position that support in the way that they need it and when they need it. And just having that empathy, building that empathy also takes time and experience. So that's why, even founders say this, that they prefer to work with operator and investors. So investors that have had some experience building things, no matter how small. And the reason for that is these investors are focused on supporting them and walking with them through the trenches, rather than just analyzing how well that they've done walking through the trenches by themselves. So I think founder empathy is a soft skill that I think is missing in the ecosystem.
Love that. Noi?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all the points said, especially on the soft skills side. It's definitely something that needs to be cultivated over time with experience. The only thing I would add though is it comes down to the fund and the stage it's at. So even though, as Ololade mentioned, finance specific skills may be needed for finance related roles, perhaps down the line when you're then evaluating Series A, Series B, then there's a stronger emphasis on your financial acumen, because you're looking at these large financial models, you're looking at their data room and digging into their revenue forecast. So I think it just comes down to the research you do on the fund, and that comes down to networking and having good conversations with people at the fund, so you actually have a good idea of what your day-to-day is going to be like, what sectors they focus on, what's really important when they are evaluating startups. So yes, for sure, soft skills, but the financial skills could actually matter for later stage funds.
I love that insight. I think then from my key takeaways there is definitely if you are a founder and you have that experience, you can definitely be a great asset to a VC. If you don't have that, cultivating that empathy of, what are the founder struggles, what are the challenges they face is probably also a good way to start. And if you're working at a startup, you get a lot of exposure to that. I want to touch on that last bit that you added, which is around the network. So an easy way, or one of the ways that, if you're not a founder, you can understand their world a bit better is actually meeting, connecting, speaking to founders, right? And in that way, you get to insight into, what challenges they're experiencing building their startup, but you're also expanding their network. And that's very key for landing a role. So Arinze, I want to circle back to you. So from your perspective, how important is a candidate's network to helping find a job? Can you maybe speak about your experience in that space? And then also in the interview process, how can they demonstrate that they have that access?
Yeah, I think like your network is really important, because as a VC, that's primarily how you add value. So it's and like your network is like it cuts across some different kinds of communities. So like I mentioned earlier on, there is like your network of like founders that can be valuable to funds that are looking for high quality investments, and also more importantly high quality founders, right? Because you could have the greatest idea, but if it's not the startup is not led by high quality founder, it's it's doomed from the very beginning. So like that access to high quality and founders is one network that is important. The second one is your network with just ecosystem players. So that is everything from your network with like other funds to other startups to even like banks, right? Because a lot of these things come together when you're a VC. One thing I realized when I switched to VC is every relationship that I've ever built up until now is important. From the event organizer that I know in like Nairobi to like this literally like the most random things, because startups have very random problems, right? And like you need to be able to pull together your network to solve those problems, whether it's for the startup or for the fund that you're working at. Another one which I think is more important as you get more senior in VC is like your network with LPs, because ultimately the fund needs money to run and someone needs to bring that money in. And if you have those networks with like organizations, with individuals that can back the fund, that is invaluable. And then when you combine these three, networks, so that's the networks with founders, with ecosystem players, and like potential LPs, these three are foundational. I think how you can showcase these, your connection to like these communities in your interviews, one, by being a part of them, like, because like I think there are some communities, especially like just broader ecosystem communities that are open to to all. So I think for those who are on the call, even just being part of communities like CatalyzU is first of all a great signal. Because it shows, one, that you're interested in the ecosystem and you're making the effort to connect with people that are that are in the ecosystem. So I think just being part of such communities like CatalyzU are critical. Then I think the other thing is now actually putting your existing network to work with like the founders and startups that you already have within your network. So so that during your interview, you have stories to share about how you've actually supported funds, startups, using your network to either access deal flow, to connect with other players in the ecosystem or to raise funds. A lot of these things would naturally come up in the interview, but if you have nothing to share, it just seems like you're just trying to get in rather than you're trying to get in and add value. But your network is everything as a VC.
I think there's some real great practical tips in there. I want to switch to Noi. Maybe you can expand a little bit on that. So, cultivating a network, demonstrating it in an interview to kind of show the access that you have. Do you have some practical ways that candidates can nurture and leverage relationships to land a role?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, a lot of people put emphasis on networking into VC, which is, as Arinze said, it's very key. Like your network is very important. But if there's a genuine interest, it should sort of come somewhat naturally and, feel like you're just learning if there's a genuine curiosity. And so I guess like practical ways, obviously don't be shy, like reach out to people via LinkedIn, WhatsApp after panels or talks. I think when reaching out, it's very important maybe to just asking to learn more, asking more about the industry, the job. You don't always have to mention that you're looking for a job, and it helps, I guess, practically in the LinkedIn request, adding a note of where you know the person. You could also offer some sort of value, sending over a company you sourced or asking someone to look at, an investment memo you did. So yeah, those are some ways. And then I would say also just keep in touch. If you've been in the interview process, keep in touch with funds that went with another candidate or rejected you. And for me, that's actually how I got my internship. It was a referral by a fund that went with another candidate, but the interview process went well and we stayed in touch and he checked back in asking if I was still on the job hunt and then, made the referral. So, and this actually happened again last week, but unfortunately I'm with Rafiki now. So those are some practical ways. I think there are also a lot of networks you can join. As Arinze mentioned, CatalyzU is it's a good network to be a part of. There's the ANA Collective, there's Safari Club in London Africa Network. So finding out the networks around you and becoming part of those communities. And then the onus is on you, right, to actually reach out and put your pride aside and actually go for it. But yeah, those are a few ways that I think you can leverage some of those relationships and communities.
I love that you started that with be curious. Because that can lead you to so many good conversation instead of, I'm looking for a job. How can this person help me get there? So starting with being curious, connect and reach out to people on LinkedIn, add value. If it is you want to you share a deal or a potential company, or you want them to, maybe look over an investment memo, and then keep in touch, nurture the relationships. You don't know what can come from there. I think that's super practical. Thank you so much, Noi. A reminder to everyone in the audience, you can absolutely drop your questions in the chat. I'll work them in as we go. I want to hop over to Ololade now. So given your role at Founders Factory Africa, switching gears a little bit, your role involves hiring and managing candidates for portfolio companies. Have you seen cases where startup founders or operators transition into VC? And what is it about them coming from that background that helps him succeed in VC roles?
Absolutely, I have seen this. I've seen cases where founders have transitioned into investment manager roles, not at the Founders Factory Africa, but at another fund. But at Founders Factory Africa, our platform support consists almost entirely of former founders and operators as well. So case in point, myself, I'm a clear example. I was coming from a startup. I was head of HR at the startup for about 4 years, and I transitioned into this role at Founders Factory Africa. Things that we're looking for people who are technical experts in the field that they operate in. But aside from that, we're also looking for people with critical skills. And this is touching on what Arinze mentioned. Aside from having founder empathy, which is really important, we're looking for people who have critical thinking, people who have great organization and project management skills, people who have tech know-how, because you can't be a platform support. You can't work in a VC and you don't know what an API means. I mean, let's be serious. And we're looking for people who have research skills, because for you to provide support to this plethora of startups, we understand that you don't know everything, but you need to be able to learn how to learn, to be able to research and find the answers and posit it to the startups that you're supporting, and so that they have that confidence, that professional confidence in your ability to support them.
Love those. A lot of transferable skills, but it's also about mindset and how you approach a job, that growth factor, being willing to learn, open to trying new things. That's critical. I want to go into a practical question here. So Noy, you mentioned earlier you transitioned to Rafiki, which is on the startup side, moved the opposite direction to my previous question. Very briefly, can you maybe take us through a little bit of your own experience in landing this job, or even landing your previous one? Just practically, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I can start with the VC internship and then move to Rafiki, which was a much different process. I guess before that, I'll just mention a few things. That yes, it's a very competitive space. 1 second, so sorry. Can you hear the phone?
No.
Okay, fine. So yeah, it's a very competitive space, but as Ololade mentioned, the finance background is really needed for finance-related jobs. So don't be discouraged when you see like prerequisites of years of work and financial modeling, like an investment banker, because there may be other skills that you have that outweigh it. We obviously mentioned that networking is key. I think it's really helpful to apply earlier rather than later, because you have visibility before a bunch of candidates. And then really just trying and understanding what you're actually going to be doing on a day-to-day. This is either as an intern or an analyst associate. Most places have a flat structure. So in some cases, the analyst has the same responsibilities as a manager, but it's helpful to understand what that would look like. And then for me, practically, I think I maybe sent out over 50 applications for sure, if not more, if not well more. And then interview with maybe like 40% of them. And then investment memo stage, which is like the final stage, I think I did maybe 5 or 7, which were like final rounds, and then they went with someone else. So it was very draining, but like I said, if you treat each one as a learning, you note the questions that you were asked, it makes the process a bit simpler. And then practically for each fund, I would obviously have your story on lock, have why Africa, but then I would get to know their thesis. So, their stage, sector, the size of their ticket size, their mandates, and this is all online. I would look at their portfolio companies. So 5 or so that stood out to me, and 3 that also I wouldn't have invested in. And then have like recent deals on hand, 5 or so, have recent fundings or news from the current fund. And then maybe 3 trends you're passionate about and you can speak to, and then have like a few companies to back that up, and then general current affairs, and then specific questions for the fund. So that's how I approach that side of things. With Rafiki, it was much more seamless. They reached out to me via LinkedIn, and at first I thought it was an investor call, because at the time I was with Africa Invest. But a 30-minute chat turned into a 1-hour chat, which turned into, you should meet my co-founder. So met with the co-founder the next week. I just so happened to be in London the following week. So after another hour's chat, we met in London. Then we did a working session or 2. And then I kind of took them through how I would approach the role and reaching out to different clients. And then there was an offer in hand. So it was much more simpler. I think something they did appreciate, though, was the questions I was asking. Because I had the investor hat on, I was challenging them a lot with their business model and growth plans. But yeah, those were the 2 processes parallel and side by side.
It is fascinating to see the different approach on both sides. Definitely on Rafiki, it's, as you mentioned, a lot more seamless, but I also think the steps that you outline for Africa Invest, that approach, doing that upfront research, information that is available, like going that extra effort can mean the difference between you getting a follow-up call or moving to the next stage or dropping out. So I think that's super useful. Thank you so much, Noy. I'm going to come, Marco, I've seen your question in the chat, definitely going to come to it in a bit. And a reminder to everyone else, if you want to drop a question in the chat, please do so. I want to come back to Arinze. There's something that we talked about in the speaker briefing chat, which I want to touch on here, which is, there's a limited number of roles. There's incredibly talented candidates across the continent. VCs are hiring globally. They have their pick of the bunch. What's useful in Noy's experience is that there's also quite a structured way of going through it, which is interesting, whereas on the startup side, it could be anything from 3 steps to 10 steps, right? But if you are not in VC right now, and if you are looking to land a role in the medium to long-term future, what are the other routes that you feel that people can add value to the ecosystem, and why does that matter?
Yeah, I think there's a number of ways. Like, I think it all begins with identifying, first of all, what the ecosystem needs right now. What the ecosystem needs right now, other than more capital, is just higher quality deal flow. I think there's something to say about how the ecosystem has evolved over the past few years. How I think we've started to see a bunch of founders and startups that have gotten really good at pitching and really good at putting together exciting pitch decks. But then when you talk to them a couple of times, you realize it's mostly just smokes and mirrors. And I think being able to connect funds and investors with high quality founders and startups in your network is critical right now. And it's something that you can do whether you're a VC or not. You can do that as an operator, you can do that as an investor, you can do that as a founder. I think another thing, I think another way that you can add value to the ecosystem is just sharing your insights. I think regardless of the role that you're in, there are most likely things that you're doing or things that you're learning that you can share with the ecosystem that can help make startups just run better. So whether it's you're in a marketing role, you can share what you're learning about marketing strategies that work with a specific group of users or customers that startups might be looking at. If it's you are still a student and you're studying economics, for example, you can write you can write pieces or even just short posts about how startups can survive whatever economic crises that might be holding them back in the countries that they're operating in. If you're a founder yourself, you can share a bit about the experiences that you've had building your business, the highs, the lows, and the plateaus, right? And a lot of that can just help add value to the ecosystem as a whole, because I think what people are looking for when hiring VCs, like I mentioned, is they're looking for someone who can add value, and you need to demonstrate that ability to add value even before you become a VC. So regardless of what you're doing now, there's most likely some way that you can add value. And I think the easiest way out of the ones that I've mentioned is just sharing what you know and sharing what you're experiencing. It's a very low effort way of connecting with people, because also that's also a great way of building your network as well, because as you share more, as people start to find value in the insights that you're sharing, you would naturally attract a community, and the community that you're going to attract is the audience that you're speaking to. So if you're speaking to startups, you're speaking to VCs, a lot more of those people are going to be listening to you, so long as the quality of what you're putting out there is high. So yeah, I think these two are some some of the lowest hanging fruits in that regard.
Mm-hmm. And what's great about that is that anyone can take that action, right? One of my favorite authors, Austin Kleon, he says it's there's three things here. It's like build in public. So what are you working on right now that you can share? In that way, you will find your tribe. So the people that are in that space, interested in that topic, etc. And then the book that he wrote is Share Your Work, which is this idea of, you know, we are all doing things on the daily. If you want to find the people that resonates with the work that you're doing, share it in public and build in public. What are you working on right now? What are you trying to figure out? Share that journey. It's a great way and such a low bar to grow your network. Want to move on to switch gears a little bit more now in the last few minutes. So when you are in a role, or you've landed a job at a VC, even if it's in a flat structure or a hierarchical structure, one thing we all care about is how we can continue to grow and advance in our career. So Noi, very briefly from you, what are some of the ways that you've seen candidates, employees upskill and continue to learn, and in that way position themselves for advancement in the VC space?
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest one is just reading quite a lot, and there are a lot of, you know, subscriptions you can sign up to that are focused on the African continent. So, you know, Tech Safari comes to mind, Disrupt Africa, Africa the Big Deal. So there are a few that you can subscribe to and get some really helpful information. And then another angle that I like is also just the newsletters of various different funds, because you can understand, you know, what's going on in their world, and a lot of information might be shared, but sometimes it offers different insights. This is obviously very Africa focused, but the UK and US have their own, whether it's sifted or strictly VC. I think, as Arinze mentioned, writing and blog posts is always good to just give your take. And like you said, you can use that as a networking tool, asking others to read. And then I think he also put in the chat, but attending talks, webinars, conferences, because then you just learn the lingo. You know, you mentioned the funding winter. I've heard that maybe 60 times this year. You hear all the pressing issues. So those are a few ways. And then finally, the fellowships. So I actually did not one, but two. And I mean, personally, I don't think two fellowships are needed, but they can be very helpful in, you know, utilizing the network and the community you're a part of. Depending on your level, the material, you know, can be helpful, especially if it's a clean slate. But as with many things, you actually learn a lot on the job. So I think the real value is just utilizing the network and the community, and learning from others, and you continue to learn from others you're around.
Ben, there's some really great recommendations in there for everyone in the audience or watching this later. We'll share that full list in the post-event comms. Last question before I jump into audience questions and then also wrap up. This is for Ololade. Considering right now on the continent, we probably have candidates outstripping the number of available jobs. The continent is still quite interesting in terms of opportunities for startups and opportunities for investment. But if we shift the perspectives, should local candidates be looking to expand their network and look for roles globally? And can you maybe give us a little bit of insight into what's hard about that for candidates locally trying to compete with for roles on the global stage?
So yes, I would say local candidates, please apply for roles with global VCs, right? They're looking to invest in Africa, because they're looking for people who understand the environment here. They're looking for people who have the requisite skills, who are even resident on the continent, right? And aside from global VCs, because there's a plethora of talent and we need to explore everywhere because we need jobs at the end of the day, right? So I even advise people, explore, say yes to everything. Aside from global VCs, look at local VCs, look at investment banks, look at, you know, financial services that have investment arms, because at the end of the day, it's not just about your technical skill. We're looking at your VC skills are becoming very valuable not just to startups and to other tech-focused businesses, but also to more traditional businesses that are beginning to recognize the importance of having tech and also these VC skills as well. We're looking at critical thinking, we're looking at the investment analysis skills, right? Those are now being valued as important skills for the talent that some of these more traditional businesses are looking for. So I'll say explore and look everywhere. It's easy because you have right now a more global outlook, but at the same time, it's hard because you're competing with more global people, right? Because if you're looking to get a job with a US VC, you're going to be competing with the thousands of people, hundreds of people who are based there. It's easier to hire someone who's there as opposed to hiring someone who's in Africa. But I would say just go for it and explore. The worst that can happen is they say no.
Ololade, love that, nail on the head. I think it also ties into what Noi mentioned earlier. If you're going after a global VC, understand what is their mandate, where are they investing in, how does that set you up for your X factor? If they're doubling down in Nigeria, you're based there, you've been working there, there's something that you bring to the table that might help you stand out, but understand the funds that you're going after, the companies that you're going after, where they are investing, what their mandate is, etc. We have 4 minutes. I'm going to give all of that to audience questions. So I'm going to start with Marco. So Marco has an interesting question. He says, as someone curious about next steps in their career, can you provide some confidence as to why launching into a pure VC role is a good idea right now, considering the way the continent and the industry is moving? I'm going to hand that one over to Ololade, and then Arinze or Noi, if you have anything to add, happy to. But why should someone in the current climate see a role at a VC fund as a good idea right now?
Well, we live in the best of times, but we also live in the worst of times, right? You can never find a time where this is the best time for everyone to get a job in the VC space, right? All we can do is just try. And, even though we know that funding is limited, this is the funding winter, but funding is still available. It's available to startups who, pass the VC scrutiny and align to the investment thesis. We also have talent migration from Africa as well. So that's something to also consider. We have a lot of talent who migrates now to Africa, and the VCs may require people who are residents within the continent, right? So, and also finally, it may seem a little bit sentimental, but if you are passionate about the future of tech entrepreneurship in Africa, then a career in VC will be personally rewarding to you because you'll be hands-on in creating, an enabling environment for these startups to thrive.
Thanks, Ololade. Noi, you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I agree with all of those points. I think I would also just maybe flip it and say, like, we can't give you the reason, and you should think of your why, because you may want to work in African VC, but there could be other jobs that fulfill you, and I'm by no means advocating against it, but it's very perceived as like a very sexy job, so the best bit of advice that I got once was just to write down, 10 things that I want to get out of my next job. And it could be as big or as small as anything. For me, a few were like Africa related, contributing to the African growth story. Another was talking to founders. Another was like flexibility of my schedule. Another was being in a small team so my voice isn't drowned out. So if you write down your list, and you can have VC in mind, you may not, but if you write down your list, it could be that another job, perhaps at a portfolio company within a fund that you want to be at, actually ticks off more of those things. So I think VC is obviously such an incredible job, and on paper is great, but if you just take a step back and think, why VC, why Africa, and why now for yourself, it could actually help put things into perspective.
Brilliant advice. Thank you so much, Noi, for adding. Arinze, I'm going to come to you, and then I'd also like to point Eddie's question for you. So as someone working in the VC space, how do you balance the need for financial returns, so good portfolio management over there, with a desire to support and build impactful startups? To your earlier point of, it's not just about the analysis, it's also about how do you support your portfolio company. Keen to hear your views on that.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to, how you filter, I guess, startups that you invest in, because I think if you invest in high value and high quality startups and support them well, you'll be able to to kill two birds with one stone. I think the best way to do that is, you know, just being more thorough with like due diligence, which I think most VCs are, you know, being and doing now post 2023. But like I think there's still like a bit more work that needs to be done there. And like I think even for VCs, like I've seen, you know, a lot of like FOMO investing across VC firms on the continent, or, you know, because X VC firm is, you know, investing in these guys, so maybe we should too. But maybe they got it wrong, right? And I think, you know, independence of thought is such a hard and rare skill, I've realized, in VC. And I think, you know, being able to balance both, you know, supporting like the startups for the impacts that you want to create, and also creating like those financial returns that you and your LPs love, love very dearly, is, you know, like just focus on finding the best startups, even if it means, you know, like you deploy capital much slower than like the rest of your peers, just because you're more thorough. Whatever it is that you need to do to ensure that the startups that you're investing in are the highest, meet the highest bar of like quality. I think that's yeah, I mean, like, that's how I think you can do both at once. But then just to touch on like the earlier question around why now, why one should consider carrying VC now. I think, like, I know said that like he's had like the funding and winter like 60 times, but this is going to be 61st. Despite the funding winter and just like the many issues in the ecosystem now, I think these are very hard problems, yes, but these are problems that someone is going to solve, right? So I think the real question is, do you want to be part of the people that are going to solve that problem, or do you not? And I think if you're someone that's looking to do great work is done by solving hard problems. So if you're ready to roll up your sleeves and, be part of the people that are working to figure out a format, a model of venture capital that, is suited for the continent, then now is the best time to be in the ecosystem, because that's what everyone is trying to figure out now. So we are in the era of the VC builders, the people who are going to like build, like what is going to go down in history as like, like the VC model that, is tailored for Africa. So if you're looking to be part of those people, join now.
Arinze, that is a fantastic point to end on, and I think it really builds on well to what Noi and Ololade has added. So genuinely grateful. Thank you so much for the conversation. We had a couple of more questions. My apologies if I didn't get to your question this evening. We'll try and make a plan to see if we can get a response that we can share in the post-event content. From my side, thank you to all of our speakers. I've really enjoyed this conversation. There's a ton of practical advice that anyone, if they're starting in their VC career, they're looking to shift into an investment role, whether it's at a VC, a financial services company, a bank, so much goodness here tonight. And I just want to thank you all for sharing that so liberally with our audience. From my side, we are over time. I want to keep myself honest in that regard. And I want to say thank you to everyone that's joined. I hope you found some of the things useful. We've shared a ton of links already. We'll be sharing a ton of resources after this event. But on that note, thank you for your time. Thank you for our speakers for joining. And I will see you all at the next event. Bye, everyone.